Hey everyone, it's Katie Harris, and this is NursePreneurs Live. So we each week are going to bring you behind the scenes in people's businesses. And last week we brought you Gwen, and the week before, we had somebody else. Oh my God, was it Meredith that we had on with us? And this week I'm just going to go behind the scenes of my own business. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was podcast. And just give you a brief story of how podcasts have affected our business, our model, and how we've got to where we are right now. Now, I started NursePreneurs in 2016. That's when I registered the business. It was actually called, the legal name is NP Life, and then we filed a DBA as NursePreneurs. And obviously, the hardest thing about starting a business is basically being on that square one and starting, and everybody's like, oh, you got to go meet people, you got to go talk to people, network, all this kind of stuff. And there is nothing more terrifying than that thought to me of going out randomly, talking to people and meeting people and saying what, like, I registered a business, but I don't have any clients and I don't have any customers and I have nothing to offer. What can you do for me? Right. So that did not appeal to me in any way, shape, or form. And I thought, there is no way I can do this. There's no way that, how am I going to get clients? I started looking into marketing, and, you see all this stuff like, you're one funnel away. That's Russell Brunson's favorite thing for, God, I can't remember his ClickFunnels. Thank you. It's ClickFunnels. That's his big slogan. And I bought into that for a while, and it was just kind of like, but you still need to have, you have to know what the business is. You have to know what you're selling. You have to be able to put the funnel together. So I spent a lot of time and energy wasted on that kind of stuff, marketing in a place where I was too advanced for what I was doing or trying to figure out who I was. So then I had, at the time, I was still working for Walmart when I started my business. I worked for corporate headquarters, and I was doing talent acquisition. So my job was to basically meet high-profile nurses in the American Association of Nurse Practitioners and a variety of different places. And I had applied for and gotten accepted as a global nurse leader in the GNLI, which is Global Nurse Leaders Institute out of Geneva, Switzerland. So it's sponsored by the International Council of Nurses. So I was really excited to go there. And that really is what changed everything for me. I met these really amazing nurses. They were doing incredible things. And at the time I was working academics, still working as a nurse practitioner on the floor, and thinking about starting this business. And not really sure where to start or what to do. So I met lots of great nurses. And then after I started my business and people were like, oh, you need to network, I thought, well, I met some nurses at GNLI that have businesses. Maybe I'll ask them how they got started. So that's what I did. I reached out to a couple of them, a couple actually big names. So Diana Mason, who does radio and how to get on radio. And that always kind of floored me, because I was like, how do you get on radio? How does a normal random person get on radio? And that's exactly what she taught. And so I did an interview with her, talked about it, really tried to understand how someone like me, who had no experience in this realm, how do you get on media? And then I interviewed a couple more people. And the podcast itself was a way for me to reach out and connect with somebody, learn more about them, learn more about a business, how to run a business. So I really used that podcast, one, as a crutch in a way to get to know people. And then two, as, it in the beginning, I had 5 people downloaded or something. I don't know, maybe it was my mom, but it took a while for it to get traction, but that too, the idea was to have it as a marketing tool to generate interest. It's just, it took a while. And part of that was, I just really wasn't professional about it. I was just like, oh, I just interviewed so-and-so, so I'll launch that today. And then, in a couple of weeks, I run into somebody else and they had said something interesting. And I said, oh, I should interview you for my podcast. And they'd say, okay. And then we would get that done. And it was just kind of sporadic and random when the podcast went out. And, I only had a handful of podcast episodes anyway. And then one day I think I was going through a podcasting course, and they were like, you need to be professional about it. You need to have cover art. You need to, record on a consistent basis. You need a day and time that the podcast goes out every week. So that was stuff that it was hard to do, but I committed. I'm like, either you do it or you don't do it. But don't waste your time doing something kind of half-assedly. So I decided that I would do it, but this then required me to set up a whole bunch of podcast interviews so I could record them and get them set up. So I started reaching out to a bunch of nurses, searching for nurses who have businesses, and then asking if they would want to be interviewed for the podcast. And in the beginning, there was no reason for them to do it because I didn't have anything to offer. Like, nobody was really downloading the podcast in the first place. But I did get, I talked to a lot of great people. One of them was Mallory Baxton, who was doing concierge nursing in Phoenix at the time. And she had written a book, and I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. So I had interviewed her and thought, well, if she can put together a concierge nurse business in Phoenix, maybe we can do the same thing here in Philly. And that's exactly what we did. So that spurred on that business, interviewed people in IV hydration. That spurred on a whole nother. So each podcast episode has introduced me to like new nurses, new ideas, new problems that we have discovered that people want solved. And at this point, actually, one of my admins emailed me today and was like, we have about 200 episodes, and there's been about 432,000 plays of that podcast. Now, when I started that in 2016 and had 5 people listen to it, there is no way in any way, shape, or form I could have ever imagined, that we'd go from 5 plays to 430,000. But it's like one of those things that's a flywheel, right? When you try and push it to start, it's really, really hard. Like, it's really, it feels like it's never going to happen. And this is one of the things that I want to say, that podcasting can be very effective for you. And it doesn't matter if there's like 3 million podcasts out there, right? But what the point of doing it is one, to reach out to people that are in your marketplace, that are part of the people that you want to get to know. I'm not sure why you can't hear. What you want to get to know about different people in your space. So, for instance, I was helping one nurse to put up a podcast on OBGYN and coaching for mothers, both or during pregnancy and after pregnancy. And it was her ability to reach out at that point to specialists in the field. And there's that association that you get by being connected to like this top guru, this top OBGYN doc who wants to be on your podcast. And there's very few people that I've ever reached out to that have said no. I can't remember anybody, unless they were like petrified of sharing their story or whatever. But the people that we have reached out to, everybody says yes, and they come on, whether it's Diana Mason or just somebody who just recently opened their business, and we want to talk about what it is that they do. So this can be a snowball effect for you. It is a long game. Okay, you don't start a podcast and then next week you have a million customers coming in your door. You start the podcast, and over the next couple of years, if you're consistent and persistent about it, you will be exposed to a lot of business opportunities, people in your space that you may not have otherwise been able to connect with. And if people start listening to and subscribing to your podcast, you will generate more and more plays, right? So then it increases the algorithm in Google as well. So it's a powerful, powerful marketing tool. It is completely free, right? Well, except for the podcast hosting, right? When you don't want to host an audio file on your website. You have to host the audio file on something like SoundCloud or Libsyn or something, because otherwise it's just too much space and it'll slow your website down. So there's that cost, and it's like $180 a year to do SoundCloud. But for $180 a year, I have gotten, again, 430,000 plays of that podcast. So that's eyes on our business. That is eyes on our business that I might not have otherwise gotten, or I would have had to have paid to get those eyes on our business. So this is really, really powerful. And it's something that I just want to kind of hit home. So if you're thinking about a podcast, or maybe you weren't thinking of a podcast, but now you are, like, what could I talk about? What could I do? You can just start out with interviews, right? Just interview people in your space and get their perspective and learn how they got started, their challenges. I used to have a script. So when I first started my podcast, and if you listen to the very, very early scripts, it is very interviewish, like, so please tell me your name, right? And it's like I had this completely written out, exactly what I wanted to ask, in what order. It gave me, that was my security blanket. It gave me the confidence to go on and do that. But now it's just more conversational. We bring somebody on, tell me about your background. How did you get into this business? What are some of the challenges? What are you looking to do in the future? And it's really just, the conversation sometimes goes down rabbit holes that I wasn't intending, but that's okay. So, it's something that if you're considering doing, it's a powerful, powerful networking tool as well as marketing tool. It just might take a year or two for it to really catch on. So it depends on your topic, of course. But just because there's 3 million other podcasts out there, your voice isn't out there. And it's a powerful authority and credibility factor that you can implement in your business if you want. You can certainly do video if you want and post it up on YouTube and become a YouTube person. It's the same concept. I think there's a little more effort in that because you have to get dressed up and maybe script it out a little bit for YouTube. But the podcast is so easy and it can be so powerful. And it's honestly one of the biggest drivers that have in our business moving us forward, getting people interested, nurses interested in the possibility of starting a business, or, oh, I didn't even know that I could do something like that. And just being a repository of inspiration for nurses who want to start in business. So something positive that you can find, something positive that you can do and talk about can be very powerful for your business. And aside from the hosting, it's completely free. We do our podcast interviews on Zoom. If you want to buy microphone, you can. If you just want to use your computer, you can. But it doesn't have to be expensive, and it can be, again, extremely powerful. So let's say you're in the IV hydration world. What could you talk about in podcast? I mean, you could talk about vitamins and minerals, glutathione, anti-aging, bring on anti-aging experts, have pharmacists come on, have medical directors come on. I mean, there's so many things that you could potentially do in talking about IV hydration to get the spotlight on you. Concierge nursing, if you're a concierge nurse, what could you do a podcast on? Well, you could do post-operative care. And, there's one doc that's on YouTube that talks about how ridiculous people are after surgery. I mean, he talks about, some guy who had plastic surgery done and then was out jackhammering in his garage the next day because he had free time. And so, they could talk about stories. You could talk to patients that had bad post-op complications because either they didn't follow directions or they didn't have people there that could help them. You could talk to docs who see the patients, the surgeons who see the patients come back in with botched results because the patient didn't actually rest like they were supposed to. You could talk to nutritionists about perioperative nutrition and how to maximize their nutrition before surgery, after surgery, what to eat, what to avoid, exercise therapist, how to stay in shape around surgery. There's so many possibilities of things that you could do. So hopefully this is inspiring. If you're interested in starting a podcast, definitely let us know. We'd be happy to support you. We don't actually have a podcasting course, but there's tons of free courses out there. John Lee Dumas has a free podcast course you can take, and I think it's freepodcastcourse.com. That will get you started. But if you do start a podcast, please let us know so that we can support your podcast. And in general, we just love to know what you guys are doing and how you're supporting your businesses or where you are in the whole process. All right, guys, hope this is helpful, and talk to you next week.